It all started on a quiet winter morning, the kind that feels heavier than it should. I thought it was just another small disappointment, until one lie cracked everything open. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from? Comment your country below. And if stories about family, truth, and hidden betrayal matter to you, subscribe. Because this one goes places I never expected. They said it was too cold for me. I actually said it out loud, standing alone in the living room, as if the empty walls needed convincing. My fingers hovered over the thermostat. 20 degrees outside. Yes, cold. But not colder than winters I'd already survived in this very house. Back when we didn't have smart heaters telling us when to be afraid. The hallway light buzzed softly. That broken ballast I'd asked Mark to fix last year. After the holidays, Mom, he'd promised. There were always holidays. Always delays. Always reasons. On December 27th, I stood in my slippers and watched their SUV pull out of the driveway. Mark, his wife Lyanna, and little Zoe in the back seat waving through the glass. I stayed in the doorway with a tartan scarf around my neck, pretending the wind didn't sting. We're going up to a cabin by Echo Lake, Mark had said earlier, zipping his expensive parka without looking at me. You know how it gets up there, Mom. Slick roads. Guest rooms aren't heated properly. It's not really a trip for someone your age. Someone your age. It's funny how that phrase sneaks into conversations once your hair turns gray. I'd raised that boy through 2 winters in a trailer without running water. But now I was apparently too fragile for a cabin with central heating and hot cocoa. Next year, Lyanna had added brightly, adjusting her matching snow boots. We'll plan something more accommodating. Accommodating. They left behind a tray of frozen casseroles and a yellow post-it on the fridge. Love you, Mom, with a little heart drawn beside it. I microwaved the lasagna that night. Burnt at the edges, cold in the middle. I ate it by the window, watching snow settle on the hedge like quiet judgment. The house wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive. Every creak sounded louder. Every pipe groaned like it was tired of holding things together. They'd be back on the 2nd. 5 days. Not a big deal, Mark had said. Just long enough to remind me I wasn't wanted. I cleaned for 2 days straight. The kind of cleaning that makes your joints scream. Scrubbing grout with a toothbrush. Polishing handles no one noticed. Emptying drawers full of old manuals. When you clean like that, you're not tidying. You're trying to erase yourself. On the 3rd morning, I stood in the living room staring at nothing. The house was spotless. My hands were raw from bleach. I checked my phone. No messages. Out of boredom or loneliness. I opened Zoe's social media. She'd always added me. She never hid things from her grandmother. And that's when I saw it. A 10-second video. Palm trees. Blue sky. Ocean. Zoe holding a pineapple drink with a tiny umbrella. Laughing. Hawaii is amazing. I blinked. Watched it again. Hawaii. My stomach tightened, slow and quiet. I clicked Lyanna's profile. Another post. Her legs stretched on a lounge chair. Caption. Cabin life is rough. Paradise found. Then Mark's. Floral shirt. Sunglasses. Coconut in hand. Unplugging. Finally, my hand started to shake. I closed the app. Opened my email. Searched. Hawaii. Receipts. Booking confirmations. Flights. Resort stays. Spa packages. Hyatt Waikiki. Every single one charged to my credit card. Not the joint account. Not the emergency card. Mine. I stood in the middle of the kitchen clutching my phone, breath shallow, heart pounding. They didn't just lie to me. They stole from me. And that was only the beginning. They told her she was too cold. Too old. Too old for a quiet cabin trip. While they booked themselves a luxury beach vacation, paid for with her money. They didn't even try to hide it. She didn't cry. People think betrayal should explode you from the inside. That there should be shouting, pacing, something loud enough to prove the pain is real. But she just sat down at the kitchen table, phone in her hand, the blue glow washing over silverware she'd polished only the day before. She opened her bank app. The charges stared back at her like open wounds. A flight confirmation from Denver to Honolulu. 3 round-trip tickets. A booking at the Hyatt Ocean View. Lion's name attached to spa packages. Mark's surfing lessons. Zoe's snorkel rental. All of it. On her card. A tight metallic taste filled her mouth. She remembered the day she handed Mark that card 3 years ago. Just in case, she'd said. Emergencies. Travel problems. Something unexpected. Only if I absolutely have to, Mom, he'd promised. This didn't feel like absolutely. She called the number on the back of the card. Her voice didn't shake. A polite man named Jordan walked her through the charges. Yes, ma'am. All recent purchases. Yes. All confirmed from Hawaii. Would you like to file a fraud report? No, she said. They're not fraud. Just unauthorized by me. Would you like to freeze the card? Yes. Freeze it. Cancel it. Replace it. I don't care. Understood. He typed quickly. Anything else I can help you with? She almost asked him how a son forgets his mother so completely he doesn't flinch while draining her account. But that wasn't Jordan's job. She thanked him and hung up. The house hummed with quiet. Not silence exactly, but the kind that feels like judgment. She sat there, listening to the heater kick on and off. Then she did something she hadn't done in a long time. She went upstairs and pulled the safe box from under the bed. Everything was there, neatly stacked. She'd always been organized. Birth certificates, house deed, legal paperwork. And then she saw it. The power of attorney. Signed 3 years ago. Mark Hartwood. Acting financial agent on behalf of May Hartwood. No wonder he felt comfortable. No wonder he'd stopped asking. She stared at the signature line and remembered how proud he'd been holding the pen. Just in case, Mom. It's smart. Responsible. We don't want anything to happen and have no one able to make decisions. She'd nodded. I trust you, honey. She set the document down. Then she picked up her phone and called her bank manager. Rick. A decent man. Someone she knew. Mrs. Hartwood, he answered. How can I help you? I need to remove a power of attorney designation. He didn't ask why. Maybe it was her tone. Maybe he'd heard it before. Of course. We'll need a formal letter, but we can initiate the process today. Would you like to suspend account access in the meantime? Yes. He confirmed the details, told her what to bring in, promised to flag any access attempts. Before hanging up, he asked softly, Is everything all right? No, she said. But I'm fixing it. That night she didn't eat. Didn't sleep much either. She sat on the couch with the TV off, watching the blinking lights on the fake pine tree she dragged out of storage. They looked foolish now. Like the lie people repeat every December. That joy is mandatory. That togetherness is guaranteed. In the morning, she pulled on her coat and boots and walked to the mailbox. Bills. Catalogs. One envelope stood out. A Christmas card from the Wiltons down the street. Their daughter had drawn a reindeer in crayon. Merry Christmas, Miss May. We hope you're warm and happy. She stood there in the cold, holding that little card like a lifeline. She wasn't warm. She wasn't happy. But she was going to be something else. Clear. The day after she canceled the card, the phone started ringing. Lina called first. Twice before noon. No messages. Just hang-ups. Then Mark. On the third call, he left a voicemail. Hey, Mom. Just checking in. Wanted to see how you're doing. We should talk soon. That sweetness, the kind people use when they're trying to guess what you know. She didn't call back. Instead, she opened her laptop and logged into every account she had. Banking. Investments. Utilities. One by one. One by one, she changed the passwords. Some of the accounts still had Mark's email listed as a backup. Not anymore. By midday, she had a list. Every login. Every shared point of access. Every automatic payment that somehow still ran through her. Cell phone bills. Netflix. Zoe's tutoring service, even Lioness Book Club subscription, the one she'd put on May's card just for 1 month over a year ago. She shut it all down. There was no anger in her hands, just precision. She kept thinking, this is what you do when someone dies. You settle accounts. You close loops. You take inventory of what's left behind. And maybe that was exactly what this was. The death of trust. The end of a mother's blind hope. By evening, she sat at the table with a cup of tea and a written plan. Tomorrow the bank. To revoke the power of attorney officially. Then a lawyer. The will needed adjusting. They had counted on her silence. On her habit of forgiveness. On the belief that she would never change anything. She wasn't angry. Not really. She was done. That night, she slept with a kind of peace she hadn't known in years. Not the peace that comes from forgiveness. The peace that comes from action. At 6:45 the next morning, her phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Mom, are you okay? We just tried to buy breakfast and the card got declined. Something wrong with the account? No hi. No, we miss you. No mention of where they actually were. Just money. She stared at the message for a long time, then locked the phone and slid it across the table. She made oatmeal with cinnamon and apple slices. Ate slowly. Savored the quiet. Then she got dressed and walked to the bank. Rick greeted her with the same calm voice. In his office, she signed the revocation form. He explained each step, offered copies, flagged the updates in the system. This means Mark can no longer access or request information from any of your accounts, he said gently. We've added additional security. You're the sole authority again. Good, she said. He hesitated. May I ask what prompted the change? She looked at him. I used to think love covered everything, she said. That if you gave enough, they'd eventually see you. He didn't reply, but his eyes softened. She left the bank carrying a folder full of papers and a strange lightness in her chest. Next stop, Lawson and Pierce Legal Services. Her late husband's lawyer had retired. A younger woman named Elaine had taken over his clients. Flat shoes, ink on her fingers. A working woman. They went through everything carefully. You want to amend your will to exclude your son and daughter-in-law from inheritance, Elaine confirmed. Yes. And establish a trust for your granddaughter, Zoe? Yes. But not immediately. I want her to have access when she's older. Not through her parents. Elaine nodded, writing quickly. May, if I may say, you're not the first woman to walk in here with a folder, a list and a fire in her eyes. But you're one of the calmest. May exhaled. Calm is what you earn after you stop expecting people to be who they never were. They finalized the draft. It would be ready by the new year. She walked home with frozen cheeks and warm hands. At the front door, she noticed how high the snow had drifted along the steps. Mark used to shovel it when he was a teenager. Without asking. Without resentment. That version of him was gone. But she was still here. New Year's Eve came quietly. No fireworks. No champagne. Just her, a wool blanket, and a small roast she'd cooked for herself. She'd always made too much food during the holidays. Mark used to say she cooked like she was feeding an army. Maybe she had been. An army of memory. Of ghosts. Of hope. Now she made just enough for one. And it was good. Simple. Warm. Around 9:30 p.m., the text started again. Mom, can we talk? I think there's been a misunderstanding. Please call when you can. Then one more. Zoe's asking for you. That one tightened her chest. Zoe was just a child. Sweet. Untouched by this mess. But even love for a granddaughter couldn't justify pretending. Not this time. She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out the old photo albums. The heavy ones thick with dust and time. She flipped through Christmases past. She flipped another page in the album. Mark with frosting on his cheeks tearing open toy trucks. Her in the red sweater she wore for 20 years straight. Laughter frozen in glossy prints. What changed? Was it sudden? Or did it slip in quietly, like a draft under the door you don't notice until you're already cold? She waited for the familiar voice in her head, the one that always showed up with guilt. Maybe you're being too harsh. Maybe they didn't mean it. But it didn't come. The roast finished cooking. She ate in silence, watching the clock tick closer to midnight. At 11:57, the phone rang again. She let it buzz itself into nothing. A minute later, a message appeared. We're landing tomorrow night. Please let us come by. We need to explain. Landing. So they were still there. Warm beaches. Resort buffets. New Year's sun on their faces, while hers pressed against icy windows. Explain what exactly? That she was an old coat? Worn. Familiar. Comforting enough to keep around but not suitable for outings? She turned off the phone. At midnight, she stood by the window and looked out over the snowy lawn. The neighbors' teenage sons were lighting sparklers in the driveway. Their laughter cracked the air sharp bright. She smiled. Not bitter. Just tired. Happy New Year, May, she whispered. For once she meant it. New Year's Day arrived bright and still. She slept late. Took a long bath. Moved slowly, luxuriously, like someone who wasn't rushing to meet anyone else's needs. Then she climbed into the attic and brought down a few boxes. Mark's things. Old trophies. Childhood books. A varsity jacket he'd left in her closet years ago. She packed them carefully. Not as punishment. As a return. These things didn't belong here anymore. They didn't belong to the version of her son who used her credit card for beach ties. Next, she went into the guest room. The room they always used. She opened drawers. Cleared out Lionna's skincare bottles. Zoe's coloring pads. Everything went into another box. By early afternoon, the house felt different. Lighter. There's power in reclaiming space. Not just physical but emotional. She was making room for herself. She paused at the hallway shelf. A framed photo sat there, unnoticed for months. Thanksgiving 4 years ago. All of them around the table, smiling. She studied her own face in the picture. She looked tired even then. Like someone clinging to an idea of closeness that had already begun to unravel. She took the frame down. Slid out the photo. Not in anger. In clarity. Some pictures don't need to be on display. Later, she opened a new notebook. Blank cream-colored pages. At the top she wrote, "What I will no longer apologize for." Then the list. Saying no. Spending money on herself. Expecting respect without begging for it. Refusing to be gaslit by people who should know better. Wanting peace more than approval. She closed the notebook. The sun dipped low, slanting gold across the kitchen table. Clean, honest light. Tomorrow they'd be back. They'd knock. They'd smile too wide. They'd talk too fast. But she was ready. The knock came at 6:12 p.m. the next day. She was folding towels. Ordinary towels. Nothing dramatic, nothing symbolic. She didn't rush. She let them wait. When she finally opened the door, Mark stood there in a pressed polo and khaki shorts, wildly out of place against the January frost. Lionna hovered behind him, her face tight with forced cheer. Zoe, wrapped in a jacket far too light for winter, clutched a souvenir ukulele. "Hi, Mom," Mark said. She said nothing. "We just got in," he added, unnecessary. Zoe stepped forward. "Grandma, I missed you." She knelt and hugged her, her chest tightening. The child smelled like salt and sunscreen. Not a trace of winter. "I missed you too, baby," she said softly. Then she stood and looked at the two adults behind her. "Can we come in?" Lionna asked, her voice brittle. She stepped aside. Not out of kindness. Out of formality. They entered the living room and stopped. The house looked different. No extra coats by the door. No clutter left for when they came by. Every inch of space reflected someone who lived alone. And intended to. They sat. She didn't offer tea. Zoe sat cross-legged on the carpet, plucking at the ukulele. Mark cleared his throat. "We noticed the card stopped working." Mark started carefully. I figured maybe there was an issue with the bank. No issue, she said. I canceled it. Silence settled between them. Lina rushed in to fill it. We should have told you, she blurted. About Hawaii. Yes, she said calmly. You should have. We didn't mean to hurt you, Mark added. It was last minute. Lina's sister had a connection at the resort. The deal was too good to pass up. He watched her closely, searching for sympathy, for leniency, for the weakness he was used to finding. She gave him none. And the credit card? She asked. He winced. That was a mistake. I thought we still had permission from before. That was 3 years ago, she said. And it was for emergencies. He said nothing. She turned to Zoe. Sweetheart, why don't you take your ukulele into the kitchen for a minute? There's a bowl of hard candy by the phone. Zoe nodded happily and skipped away. Only when the child was out of sight did she speak again. You lied to me, she said. You let me believe you were going somewhere cold, somewhere I couldn't handle, because it was easier than admitting I wasn't invited. Mark's jaw tightened. It wasn't like that. What was it like? We just wanted a break. Something private. Just for us. And you used my money to pay for that privacy. He looked away. I revoked your access, she continued, to everything. The power of attorney. The bank accounts. It's done. Lina gasped. May, don't you think that's extreme? We've always helped manage things for you. No, she said evenly. You manage things for yourselves. You used my silence as permission. Lina opened her mouth again. She raised her hand. I'm not arguing, she said. I'm informing. Mark leaned forward, elbows on his knees. We're still family. Yes, she replied. And that should have meant something. When you made those choices. He leaned back. Lina crossed her arms. You're overreacting, she muttered. No, she said. I'm reacting for the first time. The front door seemed to pull at her. A gravity she'd never allowed herself to use before. You should go, she said quietly. Mark stared at her. You're kicking us out? I'm asking you to leave until I decide I want to talk again. If that day comes. Zoe appeared in the doorway, candy sticky on her lips. Are we going, Daddy? Mark stood. So did Lina. They left without another word. She stood by the window and watched their car back out of the driveway. For once, she wasn't the one left behind. That night, she put fresh sheets on the guest bed. Not for company. For herself. She stopped sleeping in the master bedroom, not out of grief or punishment but clarity. That room had become a museum. A wife. A mother. A giver. Too many echoes. Too many habits that no longer served her. The guest room was smaller. Cozier. A blank slate. It had always been their room, Zoe's coloring books, Lina's creams, Mark's suitcase under the bed. Now it was hers. She replaced family photos with landscapes, moved her favorite books to the nightstand. A small change, but it felt like taking her name back. The next morning she made coffee and sat at the table. No voicemails. No texts. Just a quiet so full it felt almost musical. She opened the notebook again. Things I will no longer justify. Giving away peace for the illusion of family. Covering for their choices to save face. Pretending not to notice when she was being used. She closed it. Then she opened a drawer and began organizing receipts, statements, legal documents. Everything that had once lived in shoeboxes and cluttered cabinets. Order brought something she hadn't felt in years. Strength. By afternoon, she canceled every subscription she'd opened at their request. It didn't feel like revenge. Felt like exhaling. Inside one envelope, she found a handwritten note. From when Zoe was born. Mom, thank you for covering the hospital bills. I'll pay you back soon. Love, Mark. He never had. She placed the note back in the envelope, sealed it, and wrote on the front. No longer owed. Just remembered. At 4 o'clock, she bundled up and walked 2 blocks to the notary. A young woman, barely 30, reviewed the paperwork. "You're transferring ownership of your house into a living trust?" she asked. "Yes." "And excluding all children from future claims?" "Yes." She hesitated. "You're sure you don't want to list them as contingent beneficiaries?" "I'm sure." The stamp came down hard. Final. As she left the notary, the wind bit hard at her cheeks, but inside she felt warm. Not the warmth of heaters or tea, the kind that comes from finally standing fully inside your own life. Back home she made soup from scratch, ate slowly at the table while faint jazz played on the radio. The quiet didn't ache anymore. It hummed, like a promise. 3 days passed. No calls, no apologies, no messages from Mark, none from Lionel, not even a note from Zoe, though she suspected that wasn't the child's choice. Zoe didn't have a phone yet. Lionel had always said it was too much exposure. She wondered if Zoe had even been told she could write to her. That Friday morning she sat by the window and watched the mail truck pull up. One envelope slid into the box. Just a bill. Nothing personal. Once that would have stung. Now it didn't. There was something steadying about knowing exactly where you stood, even if that place was cold. That afternoon, she went up to the attic and pulled down the box of Christmas ornaments. She used to keep them for family visits. Most years they never made it out. The family never stayed long enough to need them. She sorted them carefully. Broken ones discarded. Delicate ones wrapped in fresh tissue. Then she found the ceramic angels. Chipped. Yellowed with age. She remembered buying them at a church bazaar in 1983. Mark had been 7. He'd chosen them himself. He used to love angels. Used to believe in them. She wrapped them gently and set them aside. By evening, 2 closets were cleared. One held coats that weren't hers. The other, Lionel's forgotten toiletries, wedding favors, Zoe's outgrown shoes. She packed everything neatly. 2 boxes now stood by the front door. Labeled. Sealed. If they came back, she would be ready. She didn't plan on giving anyone another key. That night, she opened the kitchen drawer where she kept emergency cash. Beneath rubber bands and old takeout menus, she found another envelope. From a year ago. Lionel's handwriting. A shopping list with prices, totals. And at the bottom, "Can you cover this, May? We're tight this month again. Promise we'll pay you back after taxes." A heart drawn beside her name. She folded the paper neatly, then burned it in the sink. No anger. Just closure. The next morning, she woke early and dressed properly. Not house clothes. Boots. Coat. She walked to the town square. The lawyer's office was closed, but the florist was open. "Good morning, May," the young girl behind the counter said brightly. "Looking for anything special today?" "Yes," she replied. "For myself." She chose white tulips. Clean. Uncomplicated. No symbolism, just beauty. When she returned home, the voicemail light was blinking. 2 messages. Both from Mark. The first was careful. "Mom, I know you're angry. I get it. I just think we need to talk." The second was sharper. "If you're going to freeze us out, at least have the decency to tell us what you want." She almost laughed. He still didn't understand. This wasn't about wanting something. It was about ending what she no longer wanted. She deleted both messages. Then she placed the tulips into a glass pitcher. Her only vase had been borrowed by Lionel 2 years earlier, and never returned. The flowers looked just fine. Simple. Unapologetic. Like her. Saturday morning she called Elaine. "I want to move forward with everything we discussed," she said. "The house deed. The trust for Zoe. The new will. Let's file it all." Elaine didn't ask why. She didn't soften it. "I'll have everything ready by Monday," she said. "Come in and sign." It was the kind of clarity that didn't need comfort. After the call, she sat with her tea in the front room, watching the bare trees sway. The snow was melting in patches. Dead grass showed through. Everything looked exposed. Fitting. She spent the next hour in the one place she hadn't touched yet. The desk in the den. Mark's desk. Whenever they visited, he claimed it without asking. Left papers behind. Left pieces of himself. She opened the top drawer. Bank statements. Insurance copies. Some in her name. Some not. She sorted through them slowly, carefully. Then she found something, and her stomach went cold. An unsigned form was tucked between folders. First she didn't recognize it. Then she did. A draft of a quitclaim deed. The kind of document that allows ownership of a house to be transferred. Quietly. Without a sale. The seller line was blank. The buyer line read, Mark Hartwood. The handwriting wasn't hers. She stared at the paper for a long time. It hadn't been filed. It hadn't been notarized. But it had been printed. Prepared. Thought through. Which meant he'd imagined it. Maybe more than once. Maybe they'd talked about it together. How to manage her affairs. When she no longer could. Except she still could. She folded the form carefully and slipped it into the folder for Elaine. That would be part of the paperwork too. At lunch she reheated leftover soup and stood at the sink, watching the steam rise. Her mind drifted back to 2 winters ago. The night she slipped on the back steps and sprained her wrist. She'd waited 3 days for a call. When Mark finally rang, he'd said, You should really consider a retirement place, Mom. This house is too much for you. She'd almost agreed. Almost. Now she looked out the same kitchen window at those steps. Still steep. Still icy. Still hers. Every creak and crack in that house belonged to her. And it was staying that way. That evening she opened Zoe's old art box. One the child had left behind last summer. Inside were dried markers, crumpled papers, and a drawing. The house. Their house. With her name written inside a heart above the roof. She placed it on the shelf in the guest room. Her room now. A reminder. Not everyone forgets. Not everyone lies. Just most of them. At 7 o'clock the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, Mark stood there holding the 2 boxes she'd packed. His mouth was tight. Thought I'd drop these off, he said. Didn't want them sitting in your hallway. She didn't respond. Just stepped aside so he could set them down. He placed them carefully. Then he looked at her. Are we really doing this? He asked. She looked at him. Really looked. She could still see the boy she'd raised in there. But he was buried deep beneath entitlement, control, and disappointment. Yes, she said. We are. He seemed like he might argue. Might bargain. But he didn't. He nodded once and walked back down the steps. He didn't look back. She closed the door, turned the lock, and breathed. Sunday morning, the church bells rang through the neighborhood. Once she'd loved that sound. It used to mean something steady, something sacred. Now it just reminded her how long it had been since anything in her life felt holy. She didn't go to church anymore. She'd stopped a few years after Zoe was born. Sunday mornings had once been theirs. Zoe in a little dress, a thermos of cocoa waiting in the car. But Mark and Lina said it was too much fuss. They preferred slow weekends. So she adjusted, like she always did. Now the house was quiet. Just the radiator rattling. A dog barking somewhere down the street. She lit a candle. Not to pray. To remember. She set it on the kitchen table and sat beside it with her tea. Outside, the wind moved through the bare trees like a searching hand. She felt something similar inside herself. Not regret. Space. That afternoon she prepared dinner. No guests. No plans. Just something warm made slowly. Carrots chopped. Potatoes peeled. Chicken marinated. Garlic and thyme filled the house. She used the good dishes. Why not? By evening, the table was set for one. The sky outside was dull gray. A day spent remembering too much. She took her first bite just as the phone rang. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again. And again. On the 4th call, she answered. It was Lina. Her voice was strained. Brittle. May, I don't know what to say anymore, she began. We've tried being patient. Mark's heartbroken. Zoe's confused. She kept talking when there was no answer. We're not perfect, but this feels cruel. She stayed silent. You're punishing us for a mistake, Lioness said. One mistake. Still nothing. Are you even listening? She snapped. I am, she said finally. Then say something. I will, she replied calmly. When you stop calling it a mistake. There was a pause. A shift. I don't know what else to call it, Lioness said, quieter now. Try a choice, she answered. The line went silent. You chose to lie. You chose to spend money that wasn't yours. You chose to pretend I was too cold, too difficult, too in the way. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. You don't get to control the story now. That's over. She let out a long breath on the other end of the line. So what? Lioness said. You're cutting us off forever? I'm choosing peace, I replied. If that means stepping away from people who hurt me, then yes. Another pause. And Zoe. My throat tightened, but my voice didn't. She's a child, not a shield. If you want her to know me, you'll let her. But I won't beg. I ended the call. No shaking hands. No tears. Just quiet. That night, I watched an old movie with the volume low and the lights dimmed. I laughed once, out loud, at a line I'd heard 100 times but never really listened to before. You don't owe anyone your silence just because they once called you family. It wasn't even the point of the scene. Just something a side character muttered in passing. But it landed like permission. I rewound it, listened again, then turned off the TV, blew out the candle and went to bed. The good dishes sat clean in the sink, catching the moonlight. Monday morning came with frost on the window panes and the sound of a car idling outside. I peeked through the curtain. Mark. He sat in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead. The engine running like he couldn't decide what to do next. He stayed there nearly 10 minutes. Then he drove off. I didn't move. I didn't reach for the phone. At noon, I bundled up and walked to Elaine's office. The papers were ready. Everything neatly organized, colored tabs marking each decision. I read every line slowly, making sure it reflected the woman I was now, not the mother they'd tried to shape me into. Elaine watched me sign. Then she said, "This part's not legal, but I always ask. Would you like to include a letter? Maybe something for Zoe?" I paused, then nodded. She handed me a blank sheet of paper. I wrote, "For Zoe. You come from a line of women who carried more than they were given. Don't confuse kindness with obligation. Don't let anyone spend your silence. And never forget, your worth isn't measured by how much you can endure." I folded the letter and sealed it. Elaine placed it inside the trust packet. I walked home with the winter sun low behind me, the street empty, my footprints the only ones in the snow. When I reached the house, a note was taped to the door. Folded once, torn paper, my name written in sharp letters. "Mom, you've made your point loud and clear. We're trying to move past this, but you're making it impossible. I hope someday you'll remember we're family. Mark." No apology. No ownership. Just accusation wrapped in guilt. I folded the note and dropped it into the trash. Family doesn't steal from you and call it love. That afternoon, I picked up Zoe's ukulele for the first time since they'd left it behind. I plucked a few clumsy notes and laughed at how small the sound was. Still, it was something. By evening, I lit another candle. The tulips in the vase were wilting, but I left them there. Some things are still beautiful while they're fading. I made cocoa, sat on the couch, and let myself feel lonely, but not unloved. There's a difference. Being alone isn't always emptiness. Sometimes it's space. And space is where new things grow. The next day, the silence changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt alert. Waiting. At noon, the doorbell rang. I didn't answer. A pause. A knock. Then another. I stood in the hallway until the footsteps faded. Later, I found a plastic bag on the porch. Inside, a candle, a tin of cookies, and a handwritten card. "Grandma, I don't know why you're sad, but I love you so much. I miss your stories. Please don't forget me. Love, Zoe. My knees nearly gave out. I sat on the step and held the card for a long time. Not crying, just holding it. I brought the bag inside, placed the candle on the windowsill, tucked the cookies into the tin drawer. Then I wrote, not to Zoe because it wouldn't reach her, but for myself on the back of an old grocery receipt. They taught her to say please and thank you, but not yet what it means to honor someone. Maybe one day. I tucked the paper into my notebook. That afternoon, I opened the piano, brushed the dust from the keys, and played a few clumsy chords. Mark had taken lessons when he was 8. He hated every minute of it. I loved listening, though. Even then, I knew I was the only one who did. It was strange how that old memory still carried warmth. The phone rang at dusk. I didn't answer. It rang again. And again. When the machine clicked on, Mark's voice filled the room. Mom, come on. I don't know what else to say. I know you're angry, but Zoe's hurting now. She keeps asking why you won't see her. What am I supposed to tell her? I waited. Then Lionel's voice, low, almost whispered but unmistakable, came through behind him. Tell her it's Grandma's choice. That was the only thing they said that was true. It was. I deleted the message and turned the volume down. Later, I sat in the guest room, my room now, with a cup of herbal tea. I ran my hand along the smooth quilt, the freshly dusted lamp, the quiet order of a space that finally felt settled. Everything felt like it belonged to me, because it did. I went to bed early and let the silence settle again, not like a punishment, but like a quilt pulled up to my chin. Thursday morning arrived wrapped in fog, thick, low, clinging to the trees like an old grudge. I hadn't planned to leave the house, but something in me needed air. I bundled up and walked to the edge of the neighborhood, past the Wiltons' yard, where their grandkids were building a snow fort, past the corner store that still sold penny candy in jars. Familiar things. Solid things. On my way back, I saw them. Mark and Lionel stood at the top of my steps. Lionel's arms were folded tight against her chest. Mark paced slightly, like he was rehearsing a speech he didn't quite believe in. They hadn't seen me. I stopped at the corner and watched. Lionel knocked again, then turned to Mark with that look she always gave him, the one that said you're not doing enough. He stepped forward and tried the door handle. It didn't move. Of course it didn't. They didn't have keys anymore. I stayed where I was. Eventually they gave up. Walked back to their car. Mark glanced over his shoulder once, as if he could feel my eyes on him. They drove off slowly. I waited 5 minutes before climbing the steps. A note was wedged under the mat. Not Mark's handwriting. Lioness, May, this is getting out of hand. You've made your point. We're embarrassed. Okay, is that what you wanted? Come back to the table for Zoe's sake, if not ours. We're willing to talk, but you need to stop this power play. Power play. That's what she thought this was. Not self-respect. Not protection. Just control. It's funny how people reveal themselves when they believe they're entitled to your forgiveness. I didn't read it twice. I folded the note, dropped it into the fireplace, and watched the flames take it. Later I called Elaine. I want to finalize the trust for Zoe, I said. She gets access at 25. Not before. And only directly. No intermediaries. No parental management. Elaine paused, then nodded. I'll add the stipulations. It's a smart choice. I'm not doing it to be smart, I replied. I'm doing it to be fair. To the one person who never lied to me. That night I made a list of what came next. Donate the old coats. Paint the guest room a color I actually like. Check if the community center still holds Friday book nights. I hadn't thought about joining anything in years. Not to prove I wasn't alone. Just to remember what it felt like not to be invisible. At 9:30 the phone rang again. I didn't answer. The machine clicked on. Zoe's voice, small, careful. Grandma, I don't really understand what's going on. Daddy says you're upset because we went on a trip. I didn't know you didn't want us to go. I just thought you didn't like beaches. A pause. then softer. I made you a bracelet. It has your name in beads. I'll leave it in the mailbox tomorrow. I sat down slowly. There's no script for this kind of ache. No instruction manual for loving someone without letting them pull you back into a fire they didn't start, but would gladly let you burn in. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting her voice fade into the room like steam. Then I stood, blew out the candle, and whispered into the still air. I love you too, Zoe, but I love me now too. Friday morning, the bracelet was in the mailbox. Tiny plastic beads on a rainbow cord. My name is spelled slightly May, which somehow made it perfect. No note. Just a folded paper with a sun and two stick figures holding hands. One had gray hair. I traced it with my finger. Then I put the bracelet on, not to forgive, not to forget, but to remember who still saw me. At noon, Mark showed up again. No knock this time. He stood on the porch like the wood beneath him might crack open and swallow him whole. I watched from the window. He held a folder, plain brown. The kind he always used for family planning. A phrase that once meant vacation calendars and birthday budgets. Now it sounded like strategy. Eventually I opened the door. Not wide. Just enough. I need to talk to you, he said quietly. Really talk. I said nothing. He held out the folder. I found this in my office. I forgot about it. It's from before. I didn't take it. It's a binder of everything you paid for over the years, he continued. I started keeping it after Zoe was born. I don't know, maybe I felt guilty. Maybe I thought I'd pay you back someday. He swallowed. There's stuff in there I never told Lionel about. Tuition deposits. Mortgage help. Even our honeymoon. His voice cracked. When we used your card, when we lied, I told myself it didn't matter anymore. That it was just more of the same. He looked up at me. But it does matter. I know that now. Silence stretched between us like a tightrope. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. I wouldn't if I were you. But I'm sorry. Really sorry. His hands trembled. I didn't come for money. Or access. Or anything like that. I just came to admit what I did. What we did. He placed the folder gently on the porch railing and stepped back. At the edge of the steps, he hesitated. Zoe still wears that necklace you gave her. The compass one. She says it reminds her to always find her way back to you. Then he left. I didn't pick up the folder right away. I sat at the kitchen table watching steam rise from my mug. I didn't feel absolution. I didn't feel reconciliation. Just a pause. A breath. In a storm that had lasted far too long. That afternoon, I went to the community center. I didn't have an agenda. I just walked in. There was a sign-up sheet for Friday night book club. I wrote my name. May. Not Mom. Not May. Could you cover this? Not the one who always paid the bill. Just May. Someone who had finally decided she didn't need a permission slip to exist. Friday night, I walked into the book club 15 minutes early. The room smelled like overbrewed coffee and cinnamon rolls drifting in from the bakery next door. 12 chairs sat in a loose circle, most of them empty. I chose one near the window. I didn't bring a book. Didn't ask what they were reading. I just sat there, breathing in the unfamiliar air of something that didn't revolve around anyone else's needs or expectations. Other women arrived slowly. Most were my age. Some older. One younger, maybe 40, with that careful look of someone who didn't want attention but needed to be seen. We nodded at each other. Small, polite acknowledgments. The kind women give when they've learned not to take up too much space. The conversation began cautiously. Safe topics. Weather. Books half-read. Then someone said, almost casually, how hard it is to raise children who grow up into people you wouldn't necessarily choose. And the room cracked open. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just honestly. I listened. Women spoke about daughters who married men who made them smaller. Sons who only showed up when something needed fixing. Grandchildren they adored but only saw through screens. Then someone said, sometimes I wonder if I taught them to take me for granted. My voice surprised me when it joined in. You didn't teach them, I said. They just learned anyway. Heads turned, not in shock but in recognition. A woman across the circle nodded slowly. And we unlearn it later, she said. After we've already given away most of who we are. No one cried. There were no speeches. Just that quiet agreement that lives in women who've held back for too long. When it ended, one of the women walked with me to the door. First time, she asked. Yes. You coming back? I smiled. I think I already did. We laughed, not clever, not performative. Just real. At home the house no longer felt like a cave. Felt chosen. The guest room, the room that had once existed for other people's convenience, felt rooted now warm. I took off my coat, sat on the edge of the bed, and picked up Zoe's bracelet from the nightstand. I held it in my palm. No plan. No answer. Just the weight of something that still mattered. Then I pulled out a sheet of stationery. The good kind, thick, soft. The kind I used to save for thank you notes I never sent. And I wrote, Dear Zoe, you are loved. That part never changed. But love doesn't mean always saying yes. It doesn't mean letting people hurt you just because they once called you their own. Love is truth even when it's quiet. Even when it costs something. Someday when you're older you'll understand more. And when you do, I'll still be here. If you ever need to find me, follow the sound of your own voice. I'll be the echo that doesn't try to shape it. I folded the letter and slipped it into an envelope. I wrote only her name on the front. Not to send yet. Not to deliver. Just to have ready. Because this wasn't the end of the story, just the part where I stopped writing myself out of it. The first warm wind of March slipped through a window I cracked open just enough to stir the curtains. In the kitchen, a pie cooled on the counter. My hands were dusted with flour. Not for guests. Not for family. Just for me. The bracelet was still on my wrist, faded now. One bead chipped. I hadn't taken it off. Some things you keep, not because they're whole, but because they remind you that you are. The doorbell rang. I knew the sound by then. Not a threat. Not a tremor. Just a sound. I opened the door. No one was there. Only a small box wrapped in blue paper. Zoe's handwriting across the top. For Grandma May. Inside was a picture drawn in marker and glitter. Two figures again, one tall, one small. This time the tall one held a cane. The small one had wings. Below them, 3 crooked words. You still shine. I stood there for a long moment, the wind brushing my skirt, the box in my hands. Then I brought it inside and placed it on the shelf, right beside the letter I hadn't sent. Maybe one day. Just not yet. Now was quiet. Now was mine. That afternoon, I called the community center and volunteered to teach a baking class on Tuesdays. Nothing fancy, I told them. Biscuits. Maybe pie. They said they'd love that. And for the first time in a long while I believed them. I opened the windows wide that evening. Let the wind move through the rooms. Let it loosen whatever dust still clung to the corners. I made tea. Sat by the window. Watched the streetlights blink on. I didn't check my phone. Didn't rehearse old arguments. I just breathed. They say healing is loud. I don't think it is. I think it's quiet. It's a decision you make when no one's watching. When there's no applause. No instant reward. Just your name spoken gently by your own mouth. Your worth counted without witnesses. Your peace finally acknowledged. Finally. Yours. And if you're hearing this, if you've been the quiet one, the giving one, the afterthought who held everything together until your own name faded, don't wait for them to see you. See yourself. That's where it starts. And that's where it can begin again. If you're still here with me, thank you for staying. Maybe this is the moment you decide to subscribe, so you don't miss the stories that speak softly but stay with you. Stories about chosen family, second chances, and the kind of love that doesn't shout to be heard. Until next time, this is the Old Woman's Stories, reminding you that some endings aren't endings at all. They're beginnings, quietly waiting to be noticed.